Everybody, this is a guided walkthrough for the Chimichurri machine over on the Hacker Labs website. This is a Windows Active Directory challenge, and let's get started. So the first thing we want to do on any of these CTF challenges is we want to locate the machine on our network. So we're going to use the nmap program to figure out where the machine is on our network, and we're going to run the nmap program with the SN flag over here, which is going to conduct a ping sweep. A ping sweep is basically a check to figure out which machines are online on a certain network range, and we give this network range over here. So we run the scan, and we see that there are two VirtualBox machines on this network. So this one over at address number 32, this is our machine, our attacker machine. And this is the target machine over here that we need to do our hacking against. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to copy this IP address, and then I'm going to run another nmap scan on this IP address. We need to give a number of arguments to the nmap command to do our scan properly. So we're going to run everything very verbose with this flag over here. We're going to run this against all the ports on the system with this argument here. We're going to run common scripts and versioning information against the target with this flag over here, and we're going to run it very, very fast. How fast? Well, we're going to run it at a minimum rate of 10,000 packets per second. So that's very, very fast. So the problem is that if you run it very, very fast, there might be some false negatives or false positives that are associated with this. So it's probably not recommended, especially if you're dealing with a machine that is in production. But because we're doing a demonstration, I don't have to worry about that. So with all of these parameters in place, we can run the scan. So let's do that. So we're scanning this machine and figuring out which ports are open on the server, and we see here that we've got a bunch of common Windows ports. We've got port 135, 139, 53. So this is an Active Directory box. So ports like 53 are going to be commonly open. 53 is the DNS service, I do believe. 445 is quite common on Windows boxes. 6969 is not, so that's kind of anomalous. We might want to figure out what that is. And we've got a bunch of ports open on the 40,000 range. That is also quite common for Windows machines. We've got port 5985, which usually runs the WinRM service, which is administrator terminal login. That service is on port 5985. We have, let's see, we've got port 88, which is usually running the Kerberos service. And Kerberos is what Active Directory networks use to do logins. And let's take a look at, figure out what's going on the SMB service. So the SMB service is common to all Windows systems, and it's basically how Windows does file sharing. So on Windows systems, it's very common to, when you're doing pen testing, it's very common to use the netexec program. So we use the netexec program to do security testing against Windows targets. And the netexec program is basically a one-stop shop kind of program that you can use to scan all sorts of protocols on Windows targets. It's usually abbreviated to NXC. What we need to do when we use this program is supply NXC and then a protocol such as SMB and then the IP address. We need to supply a username and password. In this case, we're going to see if there's a guest account on the system. So on Spanish installations of Windows, which this one is, the guest user is called the invitado user. So let's see if this guest account is active on the box. So it looks like the guest account is available on the box. The next thing we want to do is we want to figure out if this user has access to any shares. So we can do that by using this command right here, nxc with the invitado user. We're going to enumerate shares with this flag right here. Okay, and we see that the guest user has access to these different file shares on the Windows system. So the IPC, I think IPC is for printers, I'm pretty sure. But they also have access to this file share right here, which is called drogas. Drogas in Spanish, I've been told means drugs. So I wonder what's in here. So we can access this file share using the SMB client tool. So we're just going to do SMB client. To access the file share, we need to supply a username. In this case, it is invitado, or the guest account. And we need to supply a bunch of backspaces and the IP address, and then a bunch of backspaces and the name of the share, which is drogas. So let's go ahead and access the share using SMB client. We need to enter the password. There is no password, so we just press enter. And we see there is this file in the file share called credentiales.txt. I think this means credentials. I could be wrong, but we're going to download this file. So in SMB client, we can use the get command to download the file. Get credentiales.txt. And we've downloaded that file. After that, there's no other files in this file share, so we're just going to exit. So we see that the credentiales.txt file is in here. We're going to read it using the cat command. So there's this message right here. We do not speak Spanish, so we're just going to copy this, and we're going to feed this into Google Translate. So Google Translate, we're going to go from Spanish to English. And what does it say? It says everything is better with the hacker user. On his desktop are his access keys like a parrot. So this message is pretty important for this particular challenge. It tells us that there's a user on the system called hacker, usuario hacker, and it says that the keys are like a parrot. So parrot in Spanish is perico, and this is going to come in. This is going to be an important detail later. But anyways, we can move on from here. We're just going to take note of this note. Take note of the note. Good English. Anyways, and we're going to move on. This is probably a good opportunity to figure out what the names of all the users on the system are. And if you have a valid account, oh, this is a bit loud. Let me turn this down. Okay. So if you have a valid account on a Windows system, you might be able to brute force all of the user accounts out of that system using netexec. So we're just going to use netexec, but with the same credentials here, invitado, password none. But we're going to use the rid-brute parameter here, and we're going to try to figure out what all the names of the users are on the system. So we're going to run this. And we're going to see a lot of user accounts. There are a bunch of user accounts and a lot of groups in here as well. We can safely ignore these because these are not user accounts that we can enumerate. So what we can enumerate are these user accounts over here that are in the user ID 1000 range, the ID 1000 range rather. So there's hacker, there's Chimichurri, which is the computer account over here. DNS admins, DNS update proxy, remote management users. So this, I mean, these are groups. I think the only two users, the only two actual users are these two over here. So the Chimichurri computer account and the hacker account. So we can add this to a file called users.txt. Let's just create that using nano. And then we can, so there's hacker and there's Chimichurri. These are the two accounts that we know about. We're going to save this out. And then, what is next? Okay, we should probably investigate another service at this point. So I'm going to go back to nmap, and we're going to take a look at all the other services that were exposed through the nmap scanning process. So one that that's very, very suspicious over here is this HTTP service that we found on port 6969. So that's nice twice. But the HTTP title for it here is control panel for the Jenkins application. So if anybody doesn't know, the Jenkins application is a CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. This is used for version control, I think, or deploying different applications. But if anybody knows better, if anybody has a better idea of what the Jenkins application is, lots of people probably do. Let us know in the comments. Okay, so let's investigate this port. So it's port 6969. And the IP address for this machine is going to be 162.168.200.4 6969. Okay, so we see here that this is the Jenkins application as we expected, but there's some important information on the page that has been exposed. So the very fact that we have a version number that is exposed in this landing page, this means that we could enumerate for potential software exploits on the Jenkins application. So I'm just going to copy this over here, and we're going to search for an exploit for this version of Jenkins using the searchploit command. So searchploit is a program that is connected to the exploit database, and the exploit database is basically a big collection of different exploits for different software versions or in different OS versions as well. So we can use this to search for potential exploits. So if we search for this particular version of Jenkins, we don't find anything. When you're doing searchploit for exploits for software versions, you can actually be a little more vague about it. So for example, you can get rid of numbers. So we do 2.361 instead. We don't find anything. But if we search for just 2, so Jenkins version 2, we're going to find a lot of different stuff. We're going to see here that there is something for Jenkins version 2.441. And if you remember, 2.441 is actually greater than our current version. So our current version is 2.361.4, and there's a vulnerability for version 2.441. So if there are vulnerabilities for later versions of software, that means that the vulnerability might exist for previous versions of that software. So in this case, we're going to try using this exploit right here for local file inclusion. So this is associated with this number right here. We're going to copy that number, and then we're going to run searchploit-m. So searchploit-m is going to copy the exploit file that you specify over to your current directory. So in this case, it's going to copy this exploit for Jenkins 2.441 local file inclusion to our current directory as 51993.py. So we can try running that program. And what it's going to do is going to tell us that we need to supply some arguments. So we need this argument right here, -u URL. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is the URL right here for the Jenkins application. HTTP, this IP address right here on port 6969. We're going to supply this, and then it's going to ask us what file we want to download. So before we do our exploitation over here, let's just talk about what kind of exploit this is in the first place. Let's use nano to edit the file. Oops, in the wrong directory. So what is this? So the exploit title is Jenkins 2.441 local file inclusion. And basically what this lets us do is it lets us read files that are on the web server, but not necessarily files that are being served on the website, but any file on the actual system, as long as we know where that file is. So that's how the local file inclusion vulnerability works. So it doesn't tell us too many more details about this, but let's get out of here and let's go back to our exploit in progress. So it wants a file to download. So it took me a little bit of time to figure this out, but it basically wants a file path for the file that we want to access. Before we do this, let's take a look at the credentiales.txt file again. So it says that everything is better with the user hacker on his desktop. So the hacker user's desktop, in this case the desktop directory, are his access keys like a parrot, which in Spanish is the word perico. So this is a little bit tricky, but we have to access this particular file, the parrot file on the hacker user's desktop directory. So if we put all the clues together, then you have to access the user's hacker desktop perico.txt file. So that's what the clue is pointing us to. So if we try to access this file, oh, this was the wrong tab. Let's go to the correct tab. Okay, file to download, let's place that in. Okay, and it tells us the contents of the file. So the contents of the file are hacker perico 69. So this is a set of credentials. So we can just copy this, and we're going to create a little file called, let's get out of this, this exploit shell. We're going to create a file called creds.txt. This is where we're going to store all of our credentials. So if we capture a set of credentials, we're going to store them here. So the hacker user's credentials is perico 69. Let me just copy this. Okay, we're going to save that out. Then we're going to go back to our netexec. So now that we've captured this set of credentials, we can test them. So the user is hacker. The password is perico 69. And first we need to confirm that this is that these are legitimate credentials. Okay, so these are legitimate credentials. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out if they have access to WinRM, which is the login service. If they do, then we're in great shape. And it turns out we do have access to WinRM. Remember that WinRM is basically terminal access that is usually granted to administrators. And we can tell that we have access with the WinRM service as the hacker user, because this is the output from netexec. So this plus sign over here tells us that we do have access. And it says pwned over here because it's usually the case that only administrator users have access to WinRM, which means that if we got legitimate credentials for the WinRM service, then it's probably going to be for administrator user. We're going to find out that this is not the case in just a second. But anyways, let's talk a little bit about these services that we're going to be exploiting here. So we're taking advantage of the WinRM service, and the Windows Remote Management WinRM service provides a PowerShell terminal access to a Windows server. So usually what you do is you use PowerShell to access another server using WinRM. In this case, we don't have PowerShell, so we can't do it this way. So WinRM access is usually limited to administrator levels users, but that's not always the case. So the typical method of accessing WinRM is through a PowerShell terminal, but Linux users can use the evil WinRM program to interact with the service. So evil WinRM is a program that comes pre-installed on Kali Linux machines, and we're going to use that to access the WinRM service. So WinRM, actually it's called evil WinRM. We have to provide an interface, in this case an IP address. This is the IP address. We have to provide a username, and we need to provide a password. So we're going to log in. We ask who am I? It says we are the Chimichurri hacker user, which means that we've successfully broken in. And that means we're going to call on our good friend, Scary Hacker Voice Man, to talk about it.
Hey everybody, it's me, Scary Hacker Voice Man. Scary Hacker Voice Man comes out every time we compromise a server and break in. And hello, Mr. Chimichurri Administrator. You thought it would be okay to leave cryptic messages on your SMB file share and then deploy a vulnerable version of Jenkins, huh? Well, that was a big mistake. Maybe you knew about these security flaws, or maybe you decided to accept the risk. Well, you accepted the risk. And now we're in.
All right, so we are on the system, and we are the hacker user. The first thing we probably want to do when we do privilege escalation, which is trying to gain the highest level of privileges on a particular system, is to run the whoami privileges command. So on Windows, it's going to be whoami/priv. And we're going to see that we have this privilege over here, which is called SeImpersonatePrivilege. So this is a pretty common privilege to abuse on Windows boxes, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this right now. So this is the privilege escalation SeImpersonate privilege. And the SeImpersonate privilege is a feature which allows a user to perform commands in the context of other users. So the privilege is typically associated with service accounts like IIS, SQL Server, and with administrator accounts. So I guess we could say that the hacker account is kind of like an administrator account because it has this kind of privilege. SeImpersonate privilege. And using the SeImpersonate privilege, attackers can elevate privileges to system or administrator level either through token theft or named pipes. And how do we do this? So we do this with potato exploits. The potato family of Windows exploits all leverage the SeImpersonate privilege in different ways to achieve elevated access on Windows targets. So which potato exploit to use on a target largely depends on the version of Windows being used. And in this case, we're going to be using the juicy potato variant. So let's talk a little bit about how we identify which version of the potato exploit to try on a particular Windows system. So over on netexec. So we were using netexec to do our enumeration. And one of the things that netexec is very good at doing is identifying the version of Windows being used. And in this case, it identifies the version of Windows being used as Windows 10/Server 2016. So if you go online and you search for something like which potato exploit Windows, you're going to get this, you're going to see this article over here that talks about all of the different Windows potato exploits, because you can't use one potato exploit on every single Windows box, because they keep on patching and fixing against the vulnerabilities, and we have to they develop more and more different potato exploits to use. If anybody's interested in the article I'm looking at right now, this is it. But they've got a TLDR, and it says here, if you don't want to use the sweet potato, I've never used the sweet potato before. It says, if the machine is greater than Windows 10, 1809, and Windows Server 2019, we use the rogue potato. But if the machine is before Windows 10, 1809, and before Windows Server 2019, we use the juicy potato. So this target is Windows Server 2016. So this is the case here, and we have to use we should use the juicy potato. So we can actually Google for this. So juicy potato GitHub. And this is the link that shows up. So what we need to do to get the juicy potato working is we need to download the binary to our attacker machine, and we can do that from this link right here. So in the sidebar, there's the releases. I'm just going to open that up, and there's the juicypotato.exe file. We're just going to copy that link, and then we're going to download it. Okay, so let's go ahead and download this binary. So over here on my Kali Linux box, we're just going to wget and then download the juicy potato binary. Okay, so the binary is now downloaded, and now we can upload this to our target Windows machine. So we go back to our netcat shell over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to move into this hacker user's home directory. So we're inside the user's hacker directory over here, and they probably have access to this machine. Oh, I've given away my... I've tipped my hand a little bit. I moved over the netcat binary beforehand. But let's go ahead and recreate these steps. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the juicy potato binary to run a command. And we're going to run that command in the context of the NT-authority system user, which means that we're going to be able to get a NT system authority reverse shell. So what we want to do is transfer some tools over to the Windows system. And we want to transfer the netcat binary, which is going to let us get a reverse shell connection. And we're also going to transfer over the juicy potato binary so that we can pair it up with the netcat binary. So what we're going to do is we got the juicy potato binary in our temporary directory. We're going to copy over the netcat binary here as well. So on Kali Linux, there are a number of Windows binaries on here as well. So we can copy one over to our current directory here by running this command here. Okay. So after that, we've got both the netcat binary and the juicy potato exploit binary over here. Okay, so the two files are here. We're going to upload them to our target now. So netcat over here. Sorry, netexec. We're going to use the evil WinRM upload function to upload these files. So we're just going to upload netcat.exe, and then we're going to upload juicypotato.exe, but we're going to save it as something else. We're going to save it as jp.exe because juicy potato is kind of a pain in the butt to keep on typing over and over again. Okay. So we see here that the netcat copied over successfully, but the other file was, hold on. Did the juicy potato binary disappear? Was it swallowed? Let me just try uploading. Upload juicypotato.exe. Oh, no. Okay, juicy potatoes here. I wonder what happened there. Anyways, let's go ahead and prepare to use the juicy potato exploit. So to use the juicy potato exploit, what we're going to do is we're going to use the exploit to run netcat to give us a reverse shell. So that means we're going to set up a reverse shell ahead of time. I'm going to go to another tab, and I'm going to use rlwrap, which is a nice little utility program that we can pair with netcat to get added functionality in our netcat shells. So it's going to let us do move around in our terminal as well as do command history. So we're going to run netcat on port 443, my favorite port. And this is the listener for the reverse shell. On our target here, we're going to run juicypotato.exe. So the potato exploits all require a certain amount of command syntax to run. And let me demonstrate what that command syntax is over here. So it's kind of long. We've got juicypotato.exe. I need to adjust the name of this. So it's juicypotato.exe. So along with this command, we have to supply a number of different arguments. So first of all, we need to supply a port that's not being used, a listener port. In this case, this port is usually not in use on any Windows systems. We need to supply a command that we're going to run with Juicy Potato, and we're going to run the Windows System32 cmd.exe command. So we're basically going to run a command, and we need to supply an argument to the command. So with the cmd.exe command, we're going to run this program right here. So the C users hacker netcat.exe binary. We're going to use that binary to create a connection to our machine on this IP address on this port right here. And when we connect, we're going to execute the command prompt. So this is this portion of the command. Let me double check to see if our IP address is this one right here. It looks like our IP address has changed. We're at address number 32. So I need to adjust that command. Okay, let's adjust this. Remember, everybody, hacking is very precise. If you do not spell properly, if you do not use correct syntax, you do not get to hack, and then you'd be very sad. The last thing we have to do is we have to supply a CLSID with this portion right here. And CLSIDs are basically they're little IDs that are associated with different services and different users. And to get the correct CLSID, you can go to this website, which is the one for Juicy Potato, and you can click on this link that goes to interesting CLSIDs on several Windows versions. So you would go to here, and then we would look up the version of Windows that the target's using. In this case, the target's using Windows Server 2016 Standard. So we click on that, and then we see that there are a bunch of different CLSIDs associated with different targets, with different services and different users. So for example, this one here is being used in the context of the NT Authority system user, and this is a CLSID. So you have to look this up, and you need to plug this in when you're using the Juicy Potato exploit. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Sometimes the CLSIDs are not going to work. One specific one that might not work, so you have to switch these out to figure out which CLSID is going to work on this system. So I find that this one works on this system, so we're going to go ahead and run the command. Juicy Potato is going to take advantage of the SeImpersonate privilege. It's going to run the command.exe program to run the netcat.exe program to create a reverse shell to our target in the context of the NT-authority system user. Okay, so we go ahead and run that. And it says juicy potato not found. Hold on. Oh, this is the wrong window. Okay, this is the Kali Linux window. Sorry. We need to go over here where we're actually logged into the Windows target. Okay, let's run that. So it says here, we run the exploit. It tests this CLS ID, and it tests this listener port over here. So it says that it is running in the context of NT-authority system, and it says created with process token OK. Create process with token is OK. So let's go ahead and take a look at our reverse shell. So the reverse shell was caught, and we now have access to the Windows system. Remember, because the reverse shell was created by the NT-authority system process, the reverse shell that we get is in the context of the NT-authority system user, and we have now rooted the target. So that means...
What are you? I'm system root.
Okay, so we're very close to finishing this exercise. All we need to do now is to move into the administrator's desktop directory and then get the flag file. So we are the NT-authority system user. If we take a look at what privileges, actually what groups we belong to, we basically belong to every group, which includes the administrator group, which means we have complete access to all the files on the system. So yeah, the administrator's directory, we're part of that. So let's move into that directory. So we've got administrador. Remember, this is a Spanish system, so it's not administrator, it's administrador. CD administrador, CD desktop, and this is the root flag over here. So when we read this file, we've effectively completed the challenge. So we're not going to read this file in a traditional sense, because the organizers over at the Hackers Labs probably don't want people to reveal flags on these kind of walkthrough videos or live streams. So what we're going to do is we're going to type root.txt to read it, but we're going to redirect that output into a file called iRead.root.txt. So it says exceso denegado. Exceso denegado. Are you sure? We weren't able to read this. Huh. Hold on. I want to take control of this directory. Let me just look up how to do that real quick. You don't need to grant access to yourself. You need to grant access to your normal user account. Find your actual user account by running Okay, well, that means that we would have to give the access to the hacker user, right? Oh, actually, wait. If you wanted to grant access to all users, you could use grant everyone. Grant everyone. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, let's do that. Copy that. This is a little bit. This was unexpected. Okay. So the path is going to be C users administrador desktop root.txt grant everyone R. Okay, I don't know if this went through correctly or not, so I'm just going to do some Google Translate. error, well, no mapping between account names and security IDs was performed. Huh. So it seems like it didn't go through. Yeah, access denied. Okay, let's give access to the hacker user. Okay, so it looks like I was able to give access to the hacker user, which means if we log in as the hacker user, we should be able to read the file now. So let's go back to the hacker user, and we're going to type C users administrator desktop roots.txt, output that to C users hacker ired root.txt. Okay, so we were able to access the root.txt file, and we create this file called iredroot.txt, which means we've effectively finished the box. Wow, that extra step took a little while to do. But thank you very much for watching this guided walkthrough for the Chimichurri challenge over at thehackerslabs.com. If you enjoyed this guided walkthrough video, please click on the like and subscribe buttons on the video and leave a comment underneath the video. But until next time, HackerFrogs out.
Hey there, HackerFrogs! Are you enjoying this workshop? Learning new concepts and skills? If so, there's a way you can support the channel, and it's totally free. Just click on the subscribe button below the video. Also, click on the like button. And if you have questions or comments on this workshop, please leave them below the video. Thanks for listening. And now, back to our scheduled programming.